Behold, we find you where the plower breaks the hard soil, where the miner digs metals from the generous earth, where people earn their bread by the sweat of their brow, among the lonely and the poor, the lowly and the lost, in blazing heat and shattered storm, you are with them. Behold, we find you in the mind, free to sail by its own star, in words that spring from the depth of truth, where the scientist and the theologian toil to unravel the secrets of your world, where the poet makes beauty out of truth, where people look at life from the vantage point of faith, where we read text and listen to lectures. Behold, we find you wherever people struggle for freedom, wherever noble and loving deeds are done. Your glory fills the world, our bodies, our praise, and our lament. Hear our voices again and again.
Greetings, one and all, and welcome to Vanderbilt Divinity School, to our annual opening convocation, to the dedication of our building's new addition, the E-Rooms and Leona B. Carpenter Wing, and for those of you who are incoming students, to the adventurous journey that is theological education, especially here at Vanderbilt Divinity School. It's a journey we undertake together as a community that learns together, worships together, struggles together, and rejoices together, including, we hope, in a few years, God willing, when you walk across this stage to get your diplomas. It's fitting that your journey start here in Benton Chapel, which is BDS's original worship space. You may not feel it, but we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. The faculty, staff, and students who precede us. GDR alumnus and beloved faculty member, the late Dale Andrews. The Reverends James Lawson and Kelly Miller Smith, leaders of the modern civil rights movement. Social entrepreneur, author, and Episcopal priest, the Reverend Becca Stevens. And the Reverend Ann Day, a visionary LGBTQ activist and family trustee of the Carpenter Foundation, whose generous gift enabled the construction of our new wing. It may be tempting to think of them as heroes and sheroes who were single-minded and stalwart in their relentless pursuit of justice for the least of these. But that is far from the truth. Like ours and yours, theirs were journeys of fits and starts, moments of doubt and dread, as well as certainty. And like ours, theirs were journeys taken in the company of others, peers and mentors, whose support they relied upon, whether it came in the form of challenge or affirmation. Journeys are as much about place as people, and places are equally complicated. This school of the prophets sits on land stolen centuries ago from native peoples we know as Cherokee and Shawnee. It is embedded in a university founded by a Gilded Age railroad tycoon, some might say robber baron. A university that, like so many in recent years, has to its credit labored to confront its slavocratic legacy and the resulting decades of complicity with all the isms that capitalist, cis, heteropatriarchal white supremacy, as we say these days, has unleashed on this world. The journey you'll take today, in fact, will take you into and through the most recent episode in this complex history of the School of the Prophets. If you walked the concrete walkways to get into the Carpenter Wing, you walked on walkways involved in a contract dispute, one that was, I'm happy to say, well and justly settled. At the conclusion of this convocation, we'll walk over to the Carpenter Wing for its dedication. And there you'll take another walkway, one that starts in the atrium of the Carpenter Wing in front of a fountain that I'm sure to you will call to mind the Tree of Life. Embedded in the floor is a line of small, dark granite bricks that subtly point you from the atrium toward the space, which is where we'll gather for the dedication. As you enter the space, you'll see much larger dark granite stones that lead across it to a glass door that fittingly looks out onto 21st Avenue and onto the troubled, larger world outside. Engraved into these stones are words that bespeak the theological gifts and virtues that are at the heart of this journey called theological education. Peace, faith, grace, healing, hope, joy, justice, love, mercy, and wonder. Welcome. Let this next stage of our journey begin.
Well, good afternoon. A reading from Genesis 32, verses 24 through 31. I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go, unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But the man said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. I have been tasked this afternoon with inviting you to be involved in this community. But I have to tell you that when you get involved in this community, there's going to be some wrestling. There's going to be a whole lot of wrestling. And you might be wrestling in your lectures or your discussion groups. You might be lecturing or wrestling as you go out to grab a bite to eat and wonder how you're talking about God more than you ever thought you would. Or you might be wrestling internally, thinking about what you're hearing and reading and experiencing, trying to figure out what it is you actually believe. But take heart, because the blessings that you receive from this wrestling are untold. And I don't say that this afternoon as someone who's just trying to preach a text from Genesis. I say this as someone who is still wrestling and who is still receiving blessings, because catch this, the sun has not yet risen on my degree. When I think back at the wrestling that I've had to do because I've been involved in this community, but the blessings that have come from it, there's just not enough time in the day to detail all of it. Whether it's the community that I have gained, the deep friendships that have formed, the knowledge I've gained, or just the change within me from the first day I walked through those doors in Benton Chapel to standing in front of you now, I can't describe the blessings. But keep in mind, you're going to be wrestling all night long. And because of that, you just might get struck a couple times. You just might walk out of here with some scrapes and scratches because you're working hard. You are wrestling all night long. But when you get to this stage, when you get to walk up here and shake the good Reverend Dr. Dean Emily M. Towns' hand as she hands you that degree that you wrestled all night long for, and you look up at that window and see all the sun coming through this beautiful chapel on that glorious morning, you just might walk off that stage with a little limp. But it's okay. Because when you look back at how you got involved and how you wrestled and think of the blessings that came from it, you'll know that it was worth it. So keep your head up. Get involved. Because even though you're going to be tired from wrestling all night long, even though you're going to have a little limp in your hip after you walk off this stage, when you leave this place and pass Peniel and look up, you just might see a sun rising on the new thing that God has in store for you. Amen.
Good afternoon. Our reading is taken from Toni Morrison's 1993 Nobel Prize acceptance speech. I won't be reading the whole thing, although I would like to surely encourage you to read it if you can. It's surely accessible online, and I'll be reading from the beginning, a few paragraphs, and the last paragraph. Once upon a time, there was an old woman, blind but wise. Or was it an old man, a guru perhaps, or a griot soothing restless children? I've heard this story, but one exactly like it in the lore of several cultures. Once upon a time, there was an old woman, blind, wise. In the version I know, the woman is the daughter of slaves, black, American, and lives alone in a small house outside of town. Her reputation for wisdom is without peer and without question. Among her people, she's both the law and its transgression. The honor she's paid and the awe in which she is held reach beyond her neighborhood to places far away, to the city where the intelligence of world prophets is the source of much amusement. One day, the woman is visited by some young people who seem to be bent on disproving her clairvoyance and showing her up for the fraud they believe her to be. Their plan is simple. They enter her house and ask the one question, the answer to which relies solely on her difference from them, a difference they regard as a profound disability, her blindness. They stand before her, and one of them says, "Old woman, I hold in my hand a bird. Tell me whether it is living or dead." She does not answer, and the question is repeated. "Is the bird I'm holding living or dead?" Still she doesn't answer. She's blind and cannot see her visitors, let alone what is in their hands. She does not know their color, their gender, or homeland. She only knows their motive. The old woman's silence is so long, the young people have trouble holding their laughter. Finally, she speaks and her voice is soft but stern. "I don't know," she says. "I don't know whether the bird you're holding is dead or alive, but what I do know is that it is in your hands. It is in your hands." Her answer can be taken to mean, if it is dead, you have either found it that way or you have killed it. If it is alive, you can still kill it. Whether it is to stay alive, it is your decision. Whatever the case, it is your responsibility. For parading their power and her helplessness, the young visitors are reprimanded, told that they're responsible not only for the act of mockery, but also for the small bundle of life sacrificed to achieve its aims. The blind woman shifts attention away from assertions of power to the instrument through which that power is exercised. It is quiet again when the children finish speaking, until the one breaks into the silence. Finally, she says, "I trust you now. I trust you with the bird that is not in your hands because you have truly caught it. Look how lovely it is. This thing we have done together."
You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And I hope someday you'll join us Imagine all the people living for today. Can you imagine no countries? It isn't hard to do. Nothing to live or die for. No sense of love or truth. Can you imagine all the people living life in peace? Ooh. You might say that I'm a dreamer. I know I'm not the only one. And I hope someday you'll join us. And the world will be as imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. No evil in the land. Imagine all the people walking hand in hand, and you might say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Oh, you might say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as I can only imagine when that day will come, when we find ourselves basking in the sun. Can you imagine? Will you dream with me? Can you dream a world of freedom, justice, and peace? I can only imagine. You might say that I'm a dreamer. I know I'm not the only one. Take my hand and join us, and the world will be as one. Usually, the preacher or the speaker in the black church tradition loves to follow good music. Usually, the preacher or the speaker is not in tears when they have to get up and say something. You can come and sing in our house anytime. I begin, as we have done these last several years, with remembering those who have died since we were last together on May 10th, and celebrating those who have been born since we were last together. Behold the memory of Reverend Dr. Harold Jackson, Reverend Dan Roseberry, Toni Morrison, Paul Marshall. And we celebrate the birth of Thomas Archer and Sebastian LeBoon. Are there others? Blessed be. It seems that every year we begin our academic year it's after a troubling summer. This one was no different. Wildfires are burning across the globe in the U.S., Greenland, Siberia, the Canary Islands, the Amazon rainforest. And although we do have the strange case of wanting to buy Greenland as a distraction from the fact that in August alone, we have had mass shootings in a historic district in Dayton, Ohio, a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, the Gilroy Garlic Festival near San Francisco, a Brooklyn block party, a Walmart in South Haven, Mississippi. It just seems like this blatant disregard for the lives of others finds new ways to terrorize our peace and rattle our hope and challenge our will to be active peacemakers and lovers of people. But this year, the troubling came to our house, this school, as we learned that there was something radically wrong with how parts of our new wing were constructed. Subcontractors disagreed between themselves on payment, and the hard edges of Nashville's construction boom hit home. Once we learned what was going on, the university did work to make it right. And our principals as a Divinity school guided our voice and witness in those conversations. It was crucial for us to have the commitments and have our purpose statements, not only as written documents, but living documents to guide our way. Just imagine if we did not have these base notes for how we tried to live our lives as a school, one that claims its 19th century roots as a school of the prophets. A lot of chutzpah there. Imagine if you had, or you or I had no mooring from which we look out on the world and see possibilities along with the realities. Imagine if we stepped into hope and love and peace and justice and the Spirit each day and lived our lives both large and small. And we live them by trying to make the world around us just a bit more humane, a bit more caring, a bit more like a place for all, instead of a castle for a few, surrounded by moats of indifference and snapping turtles of hatred, where we mistake violence for passion, indolence for leisure, recklessness for freedom. Now you, this entering class, I have welcomed you last week. And now I welcome you again, but this time we are all gussied up as a faculty, hot. And not the hot we probably would like to be. But we don't have our hats on either, so it's a flawed enterprise in some ways. I welcome you on behalf of the faculty and staff and the wider university in a place where we imagine and use our imagination to think and dream and do the right thing. Oh yes, that elusive right thing, that thing that gets God up doing a standing ovation in creation, that thing that beckons us to the mirror to really look at ourselves rather than stand there and admire or cringe at what we see. To take that deeper look that bids us to not settle for the world as it is right now, or who we are in these moments, or believe that our sight lines are the only lines that matter in this expansive and wondrous creation of ours. The right thing, which is looking to the future by working as hard as we can in our now, and trying to shape our now into a foundation for a future that celebrates great diversity of what God sent spinning into the cosmos that brings us to our current times. Imagine, y'all, what it will take within ourselves to live into that great hope for this world, where we live at home with one another, where we cherish creation, where we create rather than destroy, where we love rather than despise, where we share rather than hoard, where we celebrate rather than send out wailing cries of despair until our throats have become raw and bleeding. Imagine that as you, our newest entering class, become familiars to one another as you journey here with us. And begin to learn new things and see new things and hear new things, and maybe, just maybe, you become a bit more of who you hope to be. Welcome to this journey. Won't you join us?
Programs, you'll have the score for the song that we're going to sing. It may not be as familiar to some as others. We're going to take you through it one time. I want to sing it for you one time through. If you know it, help me teach it. If you don't, listen. The second time around, you sing it with me. Is that all right? Till all the jails are empty and all the heavens fill, till no one hurts or steals or lies, and no more blood is spilled. God has a work for us to do. God has a work for us to do, till God's will is done and all things are made new. Pretty simple, right? So let's do this. I'm going to sing the beginning again. Steph will take it from the very beginning with that first measure. I'll sing one verse through, and then you sing that verse. And then we will go to the chorus. Got it? All right, here's the verse again. Till all the jails are empty and all the bellies filled, till no one hurts or steals or lies, and no more blood is spilled. You sing. Till all the jails are empty and all the bellies filled, till no one hurts or steals or lies, and no more blood is spilled. Now listen to the chorus. God has work for us to do. God has work for us to do, till God's will is done and all things are made new. God has work for us to do. Try the chorus and one. God has work for us to do. God has work for us to do, till God's will is done and all things are made new. God has work for us to do. Absolutely, absolutely fabulous. Now we're going to sing the next two verses right back to back, and then we'll sing the chorus one last time. Are you ready? Here we go, verse 2. Till age and race and gender. Till age and race and gender no longer separate. Till pulpit, press, and politics are free of greed and hate. Verse 3. By praying through our doing and singing through we fear. By face with a smile.
Can you hear me? There we go. Amen. All right. Before we offer the benediction and the closing processional song, I would like to go ahead and offer some directions for how we are going to process down to the atrium into the new worship space. To the rear of the chancel are two doors. Those of you who are sitting on the right, beginning with the second row, and then the first row, and then the rest of you, if you would please go down this hallway and out the door, okay? Those of you who are sitting on the left, that's you all. If you would, and everyone in the back as well, if you would please exit to by the window, and then come down this hallway. You will exit, there's a door just behind here to the left of the chancel, or wherever you're sitting. What is this, right, left? It just depends. This way. Okay? Everybody clear about that? And we will sing our way. We're going to sing our way with this beautiful songstress, psalmist. We're going to sing our way down to the new space. Okay? Thank you.
Let us stand to receive the benediction. It has been said that we sin against our dearest, not because we do not love, but because we do not imagine.
But imagination begins in deeper reflection. Imagination is the power to see grass grow, to feel the toothache of a child, to shudder at the fall of a bird, to thrill with fear at a blood-red sunset, to agonize with Jeremiah over truth frustrated by circumstances, to stand with David beneath the balsam trees and hear God pass by, to sing with John in exile.
And so, friends, you have been called to look imaginatively upon the world, upon the landscapes of your lives, the textuality of your body. Look imaginatively upon these loose threads in your hands and weave. Weave with God and weave with the saints. Weave a new world being born of courage and generosity, hope and love. Weave and know you weave not alone. Go in peace, loving well, because we have imagined so deeply. Amen.
Go with us,
are here in this space that was conceived by students, faculty, staff, alums, and the Board of Visitors when we started this journey in the fall of 2013. As we talked to all these groups and more, the common themes of community, justice, worship, light, welcome, accessibility, better classrooms, a front entrance, which meant, of course, we had to decide where a front entrance would be, a place of seeking the sacred in community, where faith is lived and practiced, and not an esoteric soundbite hosanna. Then came the conversations and more conversations, and finally finding the right architectural firm in Gilbert, McLaughlin, Casella, and the general contractor Orion and the rest of the design team. And in June 2017, construction began in earnest. It was a journey. With the support of then Chancellor Zeppos, then Provost Wente, the Board of Trust, the Carpenter Foundation, and many of you in this space. As Kitty Norton worked hard to find funding, the Building Expansion Committee worked hard with the campus planning team in those early months. And friends, we would not be here without Professor Jimmy Bird, who served as point person, and most especially Heather Lee as on-site project liaison, and Bob Winters, whom we sometimes affectionately call Bob the Builder, as project supervisor, and Josh Gill as project manager. The list is long of who helped us reach this moment that we must now carry forward. So please forgive me if I have not called your name. When I started trying to write down everyone, I realized I was going to miss too many. The last few days have been filled with conversations and struggle. Many of us gathered here know that there was a serious contract dispute between two of the subcontractors. With the advocacy of Workers' Dignity and our students and alums affiliated with it, who created an effective petition and were prepared to protest this opening if need be, the commitment of the university to its bottom line insistence that those who do business with and on behalf of the university must conduct themselves professionally and treat business associates and employees fairly. So, yes, the university ultimately stepped in to bring all companies to the table, to bring about a just resolution between them. The dispute between the two subcontractors has been resolved and payment has been made. Now that we are all back from summer break, the VDS faculty is now thinking through, talking through, hosting through, and teaching through how we respond as educators and committed folk to our religious values. What can we learn from these last few days? But we have been here before. In the late 1920s and early 30s, it was Alva Taylor and Willard Uphouse encouraging their young white male students to oppose segregation in the South, something not particularly welcomed by either the Divinity School or university administrations of that time. The 1978 Davis Cup protests against Vanderbilt hosting the South African team because of the apartheid regime it represented, and the Divinity School active witness during this time, and then Dean Sally McFay, the first woman dean, who, by the way, did not have a full-time appointment to the faculty, but that's another story. Sally was photographed checking on protesters during their picketing. The photograph went out on the national wire services, and her support for the protesters was interpreted as a challenge to the university administration. McVeigh resigned as dean to protect the school, and faculty and students began to reckon with what it means to do the right thing, when the right thing comes at a cost. The 1960 Lawson affair, when James Lawson was unfairly expelled for masterminding the student sit-in movements in Nashville, non-violently, I might add, that caused much soul-searching by the faculty and student body, and eventually birthed our statement of commitments, at least the first versions of it, in the early 1970s. So because we've been here before, we will embrace our legacy of coming together to do the right thing. But in the midst of all that has happened in these last days, all that has happened in these last days, I have been especially moved by the bravery and the orneriness, and that's a good word from a womanist, of Armando Arizate, the owner of the small minority-owned business who kept fighting for his rights and for his workers. ICE be damned. So I am very pleased to be able to welcome you to this space, the space, which is what we call it, where our commitment as a Divinity school to do the right thing stands firm. And the words you see on the floor running along that back wall that Dean Armour talked about mean something more than an aesthetic word walkway. We will continue to work, to do the work of theological education with the swag, sway, and slay of justice. Be theologically fabulous. Do the right thing. And simply do the work our souls must have. Will you join me in reading Isaiah 42, 18 and 19 in your program? Do not remember former things, or consider the things of old. I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?
Dear friends, it is with joy that we gather to consecrate and dedicate our new and old spaces. This building, its furnishings, and foundation to the glory of God and to the perpetuation of theological education. We are grateful for the opportunity to build this addition so that the life of our school may be enhanced and enriched through meetings, social gatherings, educational endeavors for holy worship, and spiritual renewal.
With gratitude, we consecrate and dedicate this space, its furnishings and foundations.
With water from the tree of life fountain, I pray blessing over the space, the foundation and its furnishings, the pursuit of knowledge, the hunger for righteousness, and the thirst for justice.
We seek blessing and consecration.
present the history book of the school and pray blessing over the chapters yet to be written. For the chapters unwritten, may the whole be a lamp unto our feet, a light unto our path.
We seek blessing and consecration.
I present the Living the Commitments document of the school and pray blessing over our communal engagement. May our desire to live in unity with each other through our rich differences and tapestry of diversity be ignited with flames of compassion so that the fire of our love warms this local community and the worlds beyond.
We pray blessing and consecration. We consecrate and dedicate this building, its furnishings and foundation. We also consecrate and dedicate ourselves anew to the service of humanity, in which we perform the true service of the living God. Amen.
Any time is a good time to pray, and any space is a good place to pray. This is an especially good time and good space. So will you pray with me? Almighty God, fountain of all wisdom, goodness, and love,
For faith, hope, love, joy, and to the communion of all souls, to the work of righteousness that brings quiet boldness, wise peace, and wandering assurance forever, to the service of prophetic love that never fails, but believes all things and endures all things, to the power that lifts human burdens by sharing them, to the following of the Holy Spirit, our Lord, to the coming of the new heaven and new earth. We do now consecrate and dedicate this building, its furnishings and foundations. Establish the work of our hands, O God. Help our rich treasure, be blessed by it, and offer it to the community, so that love may be served now and forevermore. Amen.
We have but one announcement. That is, after we will have completed the hymn for the day, we expect you to come and celebrate with us in high fashion in a reception on the first floor room 124, commonly known as the reading room. As we bring this auspicious day to a close, we've been talking about change, the change in this building. We've been talking about dreaming. I find it really rather fitting to read a quote from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. One of the great liabilities of history is that all too many people fail to remain awake through great periods of social change. Every society has its protectors of the status quo and its fraternities of the indifferent, who are notorious for sleeping through revolutions. Today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. Beloved, I bless you with holy imagination. I bless you with ethical indignation. And I bless you with sight beyond vision. All right.
So I invite you to to rest on your feet as you're able, whether in spirit or in body, as we sing our closing.
With love for every person.